Hey everybody, it's Jason. Welcome back to the Mosaic Church Podcast. At the end of this podcast, please take a moment to connect with us on social media. It's a great place to learn more and to see what's happening at Mosaic. Most importantly, hope the following message encourages and inspires you to take a new step on your faith journey. Enjoy.
Well, good morning, Mosaic family. It is so good to get to be here with you guys. I feel like I see some of you guys down at Hope Street at times, and I have, a few opportunities to be here every once in a while, and now I'll have some more opportunities to get to be with you. So just thank you for welcoming me here into your community. You just got to see a little bit about my story, very small glimpse into what my reality was about 5 or so years ago. And since that point in time, my life has shifted just a little bit more, as life does, right, as we just keep moving along. And so I wanted to share with you three of the most important people in my life. This is my husband, Taylor, and my son, Jedediah, and then my girl, who's been with me the longest, Belly. And this is about as close to as a perfect picture you can get when you have a 1.5-year-old. And this is our daily actual reality, the next one. There you go. So that's just a little bit about me, and as Michelle had mentioned, I will be out in the back afterwards, and I would love to just get to know more about you and your families. This is my immediate family, and I have this huge, big, extended family down on 26th and Capitol at a place called Hope Street. And we are going to talk a ton about Hope Street today. But I look forward to sharing more with you in the time ahead, because inevitably a lot of my stories will come out of that place. All right, I'm jumping right in today. We are going to be in John 15. I was going to send Jason a text to just kind of joke. We have communion today, so my 30-minute message had to get condensed to about 20 minutes, and I found this out 2 days ago. So I didn't know if it was on purpose, or it was all right, we're going to give you a little trial and see if people are able to listen to you for 20 minutes, and then we'll give you 30 eventually. So we are going to jump into John chapter 15, and it's probably a pretty familiar passage for you. It should be up on the screens here for you in a second, so I'm going to read it. And I'm going to read from the New Living Translation, which is just slightly different than NIV. It says, "I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is served from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile and to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love. Just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me. I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love each other." Now that is a long passage that I just read, and there is a lot there to unpack, and again, I'm in no way going to unpack that in 20 minutes. But I read it all because it gives us this really beautiful framework and metaphor to look at. So we're seeing in this passage here that there's this vine, and we're called to connect to it, to abide in it. And one of the things that I think gets a little bit of a bad rap every once in a while is that word obedience, or obey. What does it mean to obey God's word? What does it mean to follow this command that he's giving us in this passage to remain in him, remain rooted in him, remain in his love? And I think that word obey in this passage kind of gets translated to abide, and what it looks like to just truly rest in and feel secure in him. And as we do that, we're freed and set that we're empowered to kind of live out this life that he's called us to live. And in that, we're also provided for. And so there's a few things that they'll pop up on the screen here behind me. That first is, what does it look like to truly abide in his grace? Now, this passage is like nestled in between. They've had the Passover meal, and soon Jesus is going to be in the garden praying, and then he gets betrayed. And I think it's just like a really unique reminder of we have this grace, this daily grace that's given to us to live life well, to know that we're forgiven when we make mistakes, to continually get these opportunities to choose him and to follow him because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. And so that grace, abiding in that daily, empowers us to live life well, empowers us to, reminds us to be, live inside of that love. Like Jesus mentions in this passage, he says, to lay down one's life for your friend, like that's the ultimate sacrifice. And so we get to rest in his grace. The next is to abide in his truth. And I had put in parentheses like promises, because God's truth is his promise to us. And so when we rest in and abide in his truth, all of the lies and the things that we get caught up in over the day that make us anxious or cause us to worry or fear, those all get silenced the more that we are rooted and abiding in what he says is true. True of you, true of your family, true of the earth that we walk on, true of what the hope is that we have for what is to come. So we don't have to become so overwhelmed by the day-to-day stuff, or if we find ourselves becoming overwhelmed by the day-to-day stuff, it's asking yourself like, hey, have I rooted myself, am I abiding in truth and his promises? Next is abiding in his provision. And that I'm going to touch on briefly, but I think sometimes that gets a little bit misconstrued. But his provision, again, kind of goes back to he's given us everything that we need to live this life well. He's given us his Holy Spirit, which allows us to have discernment and to be aware of those that we're in close proximity to. He's given us his truth and his promises, which again help us to combat all of that fear and worry and anxiety that may creep our way when we just go about our day-to-day life. And he's given us his grace. And so as we are resting in his provision, we can find like great peace in knowing we serve a God who knows exactly what you need. And as someone that sometimes struggle with, but does he know what I want? Because I think that's kind of important too. And even greater, he knows your desires and he knows exactly what it is that we need. And I think back to that, in particular with my story, when it came time to like give up basketball, was he knew exactly what I needed. I needed a season of life where I was no longer tying my value and my worth and my identity to something that was super fleeting, that was up and down, came and went. Instead, I really needed to be able to be rooted in who he said I was. And once I was set free inside of that, I've been able to join him in doing lots of things down at Hope Street and being a better mom and being a better wife and a better sister and a better friend, because I'm not trying to earn that love and that acceptance from people. I'm simply resting in and abiding in who he says that I am. And so there's lots of ways that God faithfully and continually provides for us. As you receive and abide, as you have all of those things, we get this opportunity to receive and abide in our status as beloved. And this will probably be something that you'll always hear me touch on because I feel like it's so foundational and so important. Oftentimes when we think about love, it's always the like, okay, great, we know we're Christians, we should love people and love, love, right? But beloved is this deep, inherent value and gift that your Father has bestowed upon you. It's a status that no one can remove. There's nothing that you can do to add to it, and there's nothing you can do to have it taken away. And so as we abide in our status as beloved, we get to join him on doing really good things. And we don't have to focus on what it looks like, how we did it, who saw it, all of that. It's just, hey, like I'm so loved, I can't help but love other people. And I want other people to experience that same love because life just looks so much better. And it doesn't mean that it gets easier. It still can be hard. but you have something to rest in and a firm foundation to build upon when we own and acknowledge our status as beloved. Now, once we've owned that status as beloved, then there's some things that are true, and it kind of goes back to some of those points I just made. If I am his beloved, I am made new and set free by his grace. That first thing that we mentioned. If I am his beloved, I have access to truth, and his promises empower me to live well. And if I'm his beloved, I have everything that I need, going back again to that provision. And lastly, I think, and this is like a byproduct of that status, is I am called to go and tell others too. Obviously, I work at a place where people have an opportunity to come and volunteer, and I think sometimes people get caught up on like what their service looks like. Like, I need to go and clean an apartment, or I need to, do something that you can point to that you like tangibly did at the end of the day. And while those are very, very helpful, and we appreciate when people come and do those things, one of the most important things that people can do is just show up and like you were present and you saw another human being and you gave them the time of your day. I'll never forget one of the first things one of the members had said to me after I'd been showing up at Hope Street for a few weeks was, she said, "Thanks for coming." And like I literally would just sit in the corner and I would pray. I wasn't doing anything in my mind. But to her, she said, "Thanks for coming." And over time, I got to know her, and I realized that the impact of presence and the impact of reflecting that love and the grace that our Father has bestowed upon us to other human beings, like it's super easy to go about life and reflect a lot of things, right? Like we can reflect like, I'm angry, or like you're annoying, or I'm frustrated, or all of those things. Just drive and go to Costco, like leave the parking lot and be like, it's just chaos. Life feels a little bit chaotic and a little bit too fast sometimes. And it's super easy to just get caught up in that. But how are we reflecting God's love, his grace, his truth, and his provision to the people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis? We can't take that lightly. We can't take that for granted, because if you're impacting your family, that means you're close, the people that live inside of your home, you're impacting your neighbors. Those lives all matter. Those lives all are also going to have a ripple effect, and your kids are going to affect their friends at school, and your neighbor will affect their family members. And so much of living life on mission is no more complicated than remembering what is true of you and then going and reminding others what is also true of them. Now, one story I will share with you, and it actually happens to be about Hope Street, but we have a place called Shechem, and it's a community center, and it is now there, so spoiler alert, the building made it. But looking back about 7 or so years ago, we weren't really too sure. I had this really pretty picture and a big vision of what I had hoped that space could look like and be. And we only needed to raise about $5 million, and I was 26 when I became the executive director. So in many ways you could say okay, you were probably pretty naive. I like to say that I had a lot of faith. But we had this great opportunity to impact our community in a new way. And I just felt like God was very clearly saying this is going to happen. He didn't tell me when it was going to happen. He didn't even tell me if I was going to be around to see it to happen. But I just felt pretty clearly that it was the direction he was asking us to go. I remember we were a few weeks out, and I don't remember the years. That just kind of happens at this stage in life, and I know I'm not that old, but just bear with me. I don't remember the exact year, but we had set to do a groundbreaking. We had been working with a financing company, and they were going to give us the loan that we needed to be able to begin building the building. Long story short, that fell through about a week before we were set to do this groundbreaking, and we had foundations that support us and all of our supporters. We had news, all these things. People were scheduled to show up at this event. And I remember being so embarrassed and so nervous because I was going to have to tell people that this was not happening. And this is a little bit more where some of the pride and ego kind of was beginning to creep back in, where I was oh no, people are going to think less of me as a leader. I'm going to lose my credibility. We're going to lose our supporters. People are feeling this is going to happen, and I'm going to have to tell them that it's not happening right now. And so I will never forget sending that email out, hitting send, and then just like waiting, like anxiously for the first response. But I told people we weren't going to be having a groundbreaking, but we were going to have a promise groundbreaking. And we were going to promise the community that we believed God had asked us to build this building. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but we were going to pray over the space, and we were committed to seeing through this vision because we cared. And we believed that God had asked us to do it. And so we had this like beautiful day. We still like tied little like prayers and things up on the fence that we had and sang and all the things. It was a really beautiful day, even though it was also very hard. And I remember entering into, so this was like November, and then come January, we had our first board meeting of the year. And I was like dreading this board meeting because I knew we were going to have like the talk. And I walked into the meeting, and they're like, all right, well, what's our plan? What are we going to do? We've been working on Shechem for the last few years. It feels like we need to just kind of like set this dream down and start focusing on just like our housing, which we've always done. And one of our new board members, it was actually his first meeting at that time, said, well, what is the issue? What are you guys waiting for? And I was like, someone to either write us a check for $5 million or financing. And he was like, all you need is financing? And like, yes, all we need is financing. And he said, well, I think I have a few connections. Let me make a few phone calls. And he did. And a few weeks later, we had a bank, actually out in this area, that decided to join us on this endeavor. And from there, everything just happened like so quickly. And as I looked back, I realized that there were reminders, some of the things that I had talked about, where I feel like I had stepped outside of God's grace. I was living inside of like I can do this, I want to do this now, we can't let people down. And I wasn't living inside of the daily grace that God was giving me and reminding me, and that, hey, it's not about you, and I don't actually need you, but I would love for you to join me. And my truth and my promises say that your value and your worth and your abilities are not wrapped up in a single thing that you do, but in who I say that you are. And I didn't get to see the provision part until fast forward the following November. I stood on top of our housing roof and watched as they brought the walls in to build Shechem, and I wept. You'll learn this pretty quickly. Like I am a tear, like I cry up. I tear up. I cry a lot. I'll try not to, but it just inevitably happens. But I just wept, and I felt in that moment just like it wasn't a hand, but like some sort of presence on my shoulder, and it was just this like whisper in my ear that said like, I am a good God. I provide good things, and I haven't forgotten you, and I haven't forgotten this community and these people. And we just continued to watch as that wall by wall came in. And we got to celebrate together as a community as this vision and dream came alive before our very eyes. And so I tell you that story because as we rest in our status as beloved, as we abide in his love, we produce fruit, and that fruit is more love. Because that's the thing that actually impacts and transforms people's lives. And that's the thing that is the catalyst for moving beyond earning to receiving. God is a good God who gives us good gifts. And that's not always like a physical, tangible thing you receive. It's peace, it's joy, it's contentment. It's moving from, I need like this praise and I want to feel good about people seeing what I've done, to I want to honor and glorify him. It moves from being isolated and being so worried about your own issues to being fully committed to the benefit of the greater community that you're in. Because if each individual is important, an important part of that community, but it's that community at large, it's inside of that community where we're held accountable, where we're reminded of what is true, where we're given opportunities to care about other people and also be cared for. And that's something that I've always seen Mosaic do so well. And then it's also this opportunity to move from being fearful to understanding that God is faithful. And when I say that, I think sometimes it gets caught up in like, We think God's faithful if it turns out the way that we want it to. And I know I just told you a story where it did, but that's not the point. God is always faithful. He is always sovereign. He sees and knows what is best, and he gives us his best. And sometimes that looks like learning a really hard lesson along the way. And sometimes that looks like seeing through the thing that we actually desired and longed for, because it really originally was his desire. I just got in the way along the way. I just got really excited about that part. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to close us up here a little bit, and then we're going to do communion here in a minute. But I have an opportunity to write for a magazine called Just Between Us, and it's a women's magazine that writes encouragement. I'd love to share more about that with you too if you're interested. But recently I was writing about this very thing, and I'm going to read to you what I wrote because then I won't forget it. The fruit that obedience bears is love, not fear, rejection, or failure, but perfect love. Most days, I believe, are obedient yes, so that abiding in him is no more complicated than remembering and choosing to believe in our status as beloved. Loved people love better. Loved people go where he would go, sit with, cry with, laugh with, and always point people back to the one who has chosen them.
Once again, thank you so much for listening. If you live in Southeast Wisconsin, we would love to connect with you at our weekend gathering. For service time, directions, and to learn more about our vision to ignite a movement of love that transforms our community and the world, visit us at mosaicwi.com.